Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and one of the common criticisms hurled at the State of Israel is that the Israeli military, the IDF, abuses Palestinians on the West Bank and in Gaza, is guilty of war crimes, as if Israeli soldiers purposefully and deliberately target Palestinian civilians, terrorize families, break into houses in the middle of the night, force Palestinians to endure humiliations at checkpoints. During the recent war in Gaza, the IDF was charged with wantonly bombing hospitals and UN buildings sheltering Palestinian civilians trying to escape the Israeli rocket barrage that was decimating Gaza neighborhoods. The media portrayed the conduct of the Israeli forces in such a way that it made the IDF look horrific in the Arab world, throughout Europe, and even on American television and in the print media, the New York Times. All would have viewers and readers believe that the Israeli military is callous and immoral and hideous. Well, none of it is true. It's all a lie. The kind of lie tyrants and dictators and anti-Semites have told throughout the ages, from the blood libels to the protocols of Zion to the Nazi propaganda machine that honed the anti-Semitic lie into a science. None of the vilification of the Israeli army is true. And do you know why? Do you know why the Israeli army is in reality nothing like what the Arab world or the New York Times or MSNBC or Jon Stewart say it is? Do you know why? It's because of the men and women who serve the State of Israel and indeed the Jewish people as a whole in the IDF. And whenever one is lucky enough to meet an Israeli soldier, it's amazing how impressive each one of them is, how mature, how caring, how lovely. Each one is 2 to 1. And on this edition of L'Chaim, I am honored to introduce you to two former Israeli soldiers, Lital and Elad, each of whom has made a unique and important contribution to their country, and each of whom is a very special, lovely human being. And Lital, Elad, it is so lovely to have you at this table. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
You're both here with Stand With Us, a program of Stand With Us, and you're touring the United States. You're on college campuses, you're at JCCs, you're in synagogues, and you're just simply trying to represent, but you're both reserve soldiers now.
Reserve soldiers.
You're not actively in the army. Right. This also gives you the right to say anything you want, correct?
Totally. Exactly.
But you're here to represent the Israeli people, people your age, somewhat younger, and people your age, and the Israeli soldier. So, first of all, kol hakavod to both of you. It is wonderful that you're doing it. I'm curious, Lital, how did you get involved with the whole program that would, make you want to be a volunteer that comes to a Stand With Us event and program and visit for 2 weeks all these American venues?
Yes. So Stand With Us has a special program for students in Israel. It's the Stand With Us Fellowship in 6 different universities. And each year they're choosing about 25 students from each university to participate in the Stand With Us program, where you go through interesting program of public diplomacy, educating about Israel, a bit of history, and you're creating a project, a special project for Israel, and then you're becoming a part of Stand With Us alumni network. And for this specific tour, they were looking for people who has special stories from the army to share with other people, to share their unique experiences. I was serving as an IDF combat soldier, which is unique for women. And I took some time off. Back in Israel, I work as a journalist and as a news anchor. I took 2 weeks off to participate in this really special program, because I think it's really important, especially today, to show the real face of Israel, the real face of the IDF. And I can tell you personally, as a journalist, that it's really painful to see all the headlines.
Isn't it?
I saw how Israel is portrayed in the news, in the international media, and Israel was always in my heart. I really wanted to get the story out there. And the minute I saw that there is a program like that of Stand With Us, I wanted to take part of it.
I got it. Where do you live?
I live in Tel Aviv.
Okay. Is that where you're from?
No, I'm originally from Gedera. It's a small town near Rehovot. And now both of my parents are living in Ashdod.
Are you a Sabra? Were you born in Israel?
Yes.
Oh, very, very lovely.
Yes.
So, Eldad, I asked you the same question. How do you get attracted to the entire, endeavor? It happens to be Stand With Us, but Stand With Us is not the only organization that brings people over to the United States. Why would an Israeli, a young, good-looking Israeli guy decide to spend some of his time doing this?
Okay. I think that the things that I did during my time in the Israeli Defense Forces, they were amazing and were very unheard of. And that's the reason for me to go on this tour, to expose to the world, to show the world what I did.
Are you saying you were looking for an opportunity to give this message?
Totally, totally. I think the message of my work, of the work of my unit in the Israeli Defense Forces, is a message that should be portrayed all the time.
Okay. So Lital is a journalist. I'm asking you sort of for the headline on the first couple of sentences. What's the message you want to bring to both American Jewry and America as a whole? What's the key message?
It's basically the daily routine work that we did, that my unit did. A very interesting unit called Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories. That's a big name for a good unit that does a lot in between the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. It's basically a military unit serving as a mediator between the Israeli and Palestinian side, coordinating things from security issues, civil issues, entrance into Israel, health issues, and many more.
That's fabulous, and most American Jews know nothing about even the existence of what you're doing. Give one or two examples, practically, of what either you personally or your unit did to help, bridge the gap that ultimately allows Palestinians and Israelis to come closer together.
Sure. Just the daily routine work that we did. I was in charge of permits given to Palestinian people to go into Israel. For instance, here, if you want to come to the U.S., you need a visa. It's pretty much the same in Israel. You need to apply for a permit, and thousands of Palestinians go into Israel every year to get medical treatment, things that they can't get in the hospital near their homes, they can get in Israel. Complicated cancers, complicated heart disease, pediatric care, and all of that can be treated in Israel. Thousands of Palestinians go into Israel for business meetings, for schools, everything you can think of. Palestinians enter Israel and do that.
Your job was to help facilitate Palestinian passage into Israel.
Yeah. I was basically in charge of checking the requests of the Palestinian people, making sure that someone that enters Israel, he has good intentions and good reasons to go into Israel.
Were there ever subtle complications that pose dilemmas for you?
Of course.
Give an example.
It's never easy dealing with a civilian population. That's the bottom line. You would have many cases of people, simple civilians, going into hospitals in Israel, but their family members that wanted to go into Israel, sometimes they were wanted, sometimes they took an active part in terror, and they couldn't be a chaperone or as part of.
And maybe talk about the goods that are entering Gaza.
Of course. Another kind of half frustrating, half interesting issue that I dealt with. One of my positions was in the Gaza Strip, just near the Gaza Strip, and we were responsible for the coordination of goods going into the Gaza Strip. Goods donated by the world, from building materials to educational materials.
By the world and by Israel.
By donations from all around the world and Israel, going into the Gaza Strip. Hundreds of trucks going into the Gaza Strip every day to aid the Palestinian population. But on the other side of the border, Hamas terrorists, a world-recognized terror organization, they would confiscate the trucks, take the goods. If it's a good case, they would resell it to the people on the black market. And in the worst case, they wouldn't give it at all to the people. They would take the building materials and build terror tunnels to harm us, the Israeli side. And they would take the poor quality building materials and give back a bit to the people for them to build their homes.
You knew this was happening?
Of course, we got indications of that all the time. We would talk to people and hear that that's what's happening.
You were an officer.
That's correct.
What rank?
I was a lieutenant.
Okay, and forgive me for pressing you. Exactly what was your job? I mean, in essence, you were involved in what, in America, all we hear is about the Israeli blockade of Gaza. You were part of the system which allowed these hundreds of trucks to go into Gaza. Right. What was your job?
In that first position, I was in charge of coordinating this whole issue going into the Gaza Strip. So we would get the donations, we would get the list, we would get the trucks, and we would physically coordinate their arrival at the border, at the crossing, and basically entering into the Gaza Strip.
Okay. When you see the way the world portrays Israel blockading Gaza, and yet you know from your personal experience that Israel is working as best it can to facilitate goods and services coming into Gaza, what goes through your mind? Does it anger you? Does it frustrate you?
You know, it's somewhere in between the frustration and anger that the world doesn't see or doesn't want to see the good work that good men and women do in Israel. Endless hours to do this. And eventually the world, portrays something different. World media shows the colorful things, let's call it the easier things to see, destruction and rubble, and they won't show how the Israel side is aiding the people.
I'm going to come back to it in a moment. Interestingly enough, Lital, you were a border patrol officer, correct?
Yes.
And again, one of the things we hear all the time is how terrible checkpoints are. They humiliate Palestinians.
Yes.
And I've seen some of the stuff you've written, which is gorgeous. I want you to talk to our audience for a moment about what are the frustrations, what are the challenges? And at the time that you were a border guard, how old were you?
I was from the age of 18 to the age of 21.
Okay, in America you'd be a kid. I understand you grow up faster in Israel, but you're still a very young person. You have to make decisions all the time.
Yes.
If you can even give us a story or two
Yes.
of the difficult moments or decisions
Yes,
that
sure.
you had to make. But you write about one, but I don't think it applies to you. I want to know if there was ever a moment where you personally felt conflicted and didn't know exactly what to do. Maybe you were even frightened.
Yes.
What?
Well, yes, of course I can share with you one story, but before that, it's important for me to say that, in an ideal world, Israel wouldn't have needed those security checkpoints. People could have just freely moved from one place to the other. But unfortunately, we have those lunatic terrorists who are constantly doing terror attacks towards Israel, and those security checkpoints are a necessity. They're basically saving lives. We can see that whenever we're flying abroad, whenever we're having our bags checked. In Israel, you need to open your bag whenever you're entering a shopping mall. It's basically a necessity.
Are you basically feeling that there are people standing over against Israel, criticizing Israel for the checkpoints? And what you're trying to do is explain why they're there.
Yes.
And we don't live in a perfect, ideal world. And at the moment, your point is very well taken, no matter where we go. Somebody's asking us to take our shoes off, take our belt off, empty our pants, put our computer empty. In essence, what you're saying is that's all Israel is doing at checkpoints.
Yes.
At the same time, there was an artistic presentation at one of the museums here in New York. And I'm dealing with the curator. And there's a video of an Israeli checkpoint. And she says to me, look at this humiliation. I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching the Palestinians coming through, they don't look any more humiliated than I am going to JFK and getting on a plane.
You're right. You're right.
But that's the way it's being portrayed. And I'm asking you a slightly different question.
Yeah.
In all of your experience, sadly, were there times you felt bad for a Palestinian for the way he or she was treated by an Israeli soldier at a checkpoint?
To be honest, today the checkpoints are modern checkpoints. You can see it. It's looking like when you go to the airport. I mean, it's not like we're checking each and every one cars, or and whenever you have a permit, you're just entering Israel. And I can tell you that if someone is treating badly another a Palestinian citizen, he will be judged. He will be sent to jail. I mean, he will be punished. It's not something acceptable in the IDF army. You have so many different sources of us criticizing ourselves, whether it's the media, whether it's the commanders on the field, on the checkpoint, whether it's NGOs working all around. So a soldier knows that if he will behave badly, he will be punished and he will sent to jail. It's as simple as that. It's not something acceptable. But you were asking me to share a story or an experience that I had from my time of the army, and I can share with you a shift that I had. One shift that I had, and I was standing in the blazing sun for 6 or 7 hours, and when an ambulance pulls out right outside of the checkpoint where I was standing, and there was a heavily pregnant Palestinian woman, and she started yelling in Arabic. I didn't fully understand what she was saying, but I understood that I need to let her get across as fast as I can. But on the other hand, I knew the terrorists are using time and again children, women, disabled people, because that would be the easiest way to operate a terror attack. And I had to make the call and to tell everyone on the checkpoint that we're not letting that ambulance get across without being checked. And we've checked the driver, and we've checked the paramedic. I've checked the pregnant woman. We checked the vehicle itself, and underneath one of the seats, we found explosive devices. And I knew that if I would just let that ambulance get across without being checked, it would have gotten to Haifa, to Tel Aviv, to Netanya, and it would have cost many innocent civilians' lives. And, till this very day, I don't even know if that woman knew that she was cooperating with those terrorists, because sometimes they're just being used, sometimes they know and they fully cooperate. And it's just one example of the day-to-day dilemmas you need to face with when you are serving in the IDF. And luckily, since the time that I was in the army, we've managed to build a security fence that decreases the amount of suicide bomb attacks by over 90%. And still the world don't understand. The world look at the security fence as an apartheid wall. We've been hearing all these really horrible stuff. When I needed to deal with that during the second Intifada, having a suicide bomb attacks 2 or 3 times a week, afraid to go to clubs, afraid to go to the mall, afraid to go to eat pizza because it's a public place. And we had suicide bomb attacks basically everywhere. And when we have finally a security fence that are guarding our lives and making sure that no one can get into Israel without being checked, then that's also not okay in the eyes of the world, and it's just it's just.
And it makes you feel how it's so frustrating, isn't it?
Frustrating, yeah, it's just frustrating.
You were both in Hebron also, so you not only were in Gaza, you were in Hebron, and you were in Hebron. What was that like for you?
I think that Hebron is a microcosmos of the whole conflict. I think it's the most complicated city in the world. It's a city holy to both Jews and Muslims for the past thousands of years. And in the middle of that city lays one building that's holy to both religions, the Cave of the Patriarchs, Ma'arat HaMachpelah, which according to both scripts, all the fathers and mothers are buried there. Most of fathers and mothers are buried there. And that place is a place of worship. And we, as the Israeli Defense Forces, needed to enforce freedom of religion for all religions, all year long. A very, very complicated place to be. Palestinian population, Jewish population as well. In the middle, this lovely building, lovely holy site. A very complicated place to be.
Were you familiar with, obviously, the Jewish section of Hebron, which lies outside the gate of main Hebron? When we were there, it was interesting how it was pointed out that the Arab population of Hebron can go anywhere. The Jewish population of Hebron cannot.
Right.
And the Israeli army both protects but also enforces what the arrangement is. You were in Hebron. What was that like for you?
It's the same as Elad was saying, but I went to Hebron a few times after my time of the army to visit the holy sites. And I also have my grandfather's family used to live in Hebron, and they were kicked off during 1920. You know, no one talks about that, about the fact that tons of Jews were being kicked off from their own city. And it's just sad. When you go into the Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the cave of the patriarchs, you see that the holy the Sefer Tanakh is on wheels because you're not allowed to stick it on the ground. That's one of the rules that the Jews are not allowed. And you standing there as another Jew, feeling that you're not allowed to put something in the ground, it's absurd when it's the second holiest place, city for us.
Do most Israelis your age understand what you understand?
No.
Why is that?
A lot of the secular part of Israelis are not really educated, not educated enough. And we were born to a situation where we already had a state. It was given to us, I mean, on a silver platter. And we, you know, I wasn't alive during the War of Independence. I wasn't alive during the Six-Day War. And people tend to forget how we're still fighting our War of Independence.
How would you answer the same question? Do you think Israelis your age in general understand and see things the way the two of you do?
It's a very interesting question. And basically, whenever three Israelis meet, a political argument comes along, and immediately, you know, we all have different opinions. That's democracy eventually. There's that saying, put two Jews in a room, you'll have 5 or 6 ideas and opinions. And I think that's what's going on today in Israel. The majority of the people understand the situation, but still you have a lot of people that are uneducated enough about the conflict and about history and about Israel. Kind of the same of what we saw here in the United States. Some people that we encountered, Jewish or Israeli, just don't know or don't want to know about Israel and about the conflict and about this whole situation.
Talk about the experience you've had on college campuses or even, JCCs or synagogues, where it's other Jews who somehow seem uncomfortable with either the IDF in particular or the state of Israel and its policies.
All right. In general, I must say, we had a pretty good, welcoming and a very, very warm communities and places that we went to. But we did see people also opposing our tour, our actions, our speeches, and whatever. And it was very sad to see. It was very sad to see, especially the Jews or the Israelis opposing what we are saying. I mean, and we're not making up stories. I always say on my talks, Google it. Look up what I just said here. Look at the facts. And a lot of people just being anti-Israel. It's almost absurd to see an Israeli or a former Israeli or just a Jew, an American Jew, acting against the state of Israel. It's ungraspable.
I want to ask you the same question: how you feel and how you know, were you surprised and were you disappointed? And in general, when you confront an American Jew, let alone a former Israeli, I'm really more interested here in what the experience you had with American Jewry has been. Tell me a story, and how did it make you feel?
Yes. Well, I always say, and it's always important to say to people, you need to understand where you're acting pro-Palestinian or you're just acting like you're anti-Israeli. And that's the difference between the two. You're not really, I mean, we want the Palestinians to have good lives, to have, to be able to live their lives normally. But when someone is just demonstrating or just bashing Israel, it's not really because he wants to. You just see how they never care about what's happening to the Palestinians in Syria, what's happening to the Palestinians in Lebanon. They won't talk about how human rights are not being kept in Gaza by Hamas, how women doesn't have rights there. They don't care about all those issues. They're just bashing Israel. And it's always important to me to put a mirror in front of their faces and to show them the difference between just being anti-Israeli and really care about the Palestinians. When you see everything is going on in Syria and Lebanon and no one talks about those stuff. So you're bashing the only democracy, the only country in the Middle East that keeps Arabs' rights, that Israeli Arabs can vote, can be elected, study with me together in the university, chair by chair. You're bashing the only country that allows that, and it's just absurd.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yes.
And what do you say to yourself, after you're done and you go back to a hotel or wherever you are, and you're thinking about it, do you ever try to say to yourself, where does it come from? Have you ever figured out, do you have any theory as to why there are American Jews of all ages, but we're talking in the main right now about young American Jews, who do exactly what you're saying? They're bashing Israel with very little information and without any current perspective when you compare societies to societies. Lital, where do you think it comes from?
That's a big question. I mean, I think you have so many different reasons for each group or people that I've met. Some people just looking to feel like they're belonging to some groups in university. And usually when you're in university, you want to stick to a liberal approach, and it looks cool. That's one reason for that. Different reasons, we've seen throughout history how we had self-hating Jews. It's not like it's something new to us. That's another reason. Another reason is that I feel like I can talk about Israel is some of my friends are sometimes bashing Israel. In general, it's like the beaten wife syndrome. When a wife is being beaten by her husband, she always thinks that if she will behave differently, then maybe he will stop doing that. And the psychological reason for that is because a person, a human being, cannot live in chaos. You cannot live in a situation when you feel like you can't control your destiny. And by blaming yourself, you're feeling like you're in control. You're feeling like that if you would just do something different, then maybe the husband will stop. If you do something different, maybe your enemy won't attack you. But you know what? Sometimes the other side just don't want to stop, just don't want you to exist. And it doesn't matter how we will operate with the Hamas, they will continue to shoot rockets at us because in their charter it says that they will not allow a Jewish state to exist. And some people just don't understand it, that sometimes we're reaching out our hand over and over, time and again, and we're not getting any response. So people have different ways of looking on this conflict.
I do want to ask you to comment on the broader picture and the broader reality. I don't want our audience to think that the three of us are not sensitive to the fact that in any situation there can be abuses. There is no such thing as a perfect society. Israel never claims to be perfect. America is far from perfect. And so I don't want people to think you're coming here and saying there's no problem anywhere.
No, we're not saying that.
Okay, so speak to that for one moment. Where do you acknowledge that there are still problems that Israel has to address in its relationship to the Palestinians on the West Bank or Gaza, as well as dealing with Palestinian Israelis?
Okay, that's a very good point. I always open up these talks that I have with students, community members, and whatnot, and I always say Israel is always trying to improve. We know that the conflict is not a pretty thing, and we know that there are civilians in the crossfire and in the middle. But I always say and emphasize that the Palestinian population is not the enemy of this story, and that's something that we must always remember. Now, the Palestinian people are not the enemy. We are fighting terror organizations that don't want to see a Jewish state next to them. And that's something that I always say. Now, if we're talking about the Israeli Arabs, some of them consider themselves Palestinians, 20% that get full and equal rights in the state of Israel, everything from voting to being in parliament. We have 14 members of parliament, and just in these last elections that we held last month. You know what? Palestinians don't get these rights in Jordan or in Lebanon or in Syria or in Egypt. This is the only place that they have full and equal rights. Women rights, gay rights, everything that they can dream of getting in Arab countries, they get it in Israel.
Elad, it was very beautiful what you said. It didn't answer my question. I asked you what the problem is, and you told me all the good. I say to you that I don't, by the way, you may disagree with me.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are issues that Israelis grapple with honestly about the way in which at times Israel treats Palestinians over whom they have power. We do administer the West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
The Israeli soldier is responsible for, in some extent, Arab life on parts of the West Bank to a lesser or a greater degree, depending on which part of the West Bank you're on.
Okay.
And I meet Israelis all the time, committed, loving, loyal, patriotic Israelis all the time, who say to me, we're not yet perfect. And there are issues vis-a-vis how we treat the Palestinian Israeli that still have to be worked out. And I'm saying to you, here you are, a gorgeous young kid, you're here representing Israel, and I want to know if I were your friend in Israel and we were out one evening, would we ever talk about a problem that we saw inside Israel about the way the Palestinian Israeli, the Arab Israeli, does not enjoy the same kind of treatment that the Jewish Israeli in Israel enjoys? Or do you say to yourself, the Arab Israeli has it perfect?
Okay, that is a good question that has brought a lot in these last elections or in general Israeli society. I would say that there's always more to improve and more to do.
Where?
Everything, from infrastructure to education. We're talking about budgets. We're talking about a lot of things. But I think it needs to come from both sides.
I'm asking for one area. To what extent would you like to see Israel do better?
The situation in some Arab villages is not a good one. But
still, we have a huge minority ministry that's
it's minorities
millions,
that don't get what they get in other places. And I can't point a finger at one thing that I can say this should be done differently, or because it has a lot of issues around it. For instance, if you're talking about infrastructure in the Arab villages, then it's not just budgets that they do or do not get from Israel. It's the amount of people that pay, the city taxes and things like that. It's much more complicated than
problems. Yeah.
It's much more complicated problems than kind of the let's call it the lighter kind of interviews.
At the end of the day, they are serving as a Supreme Court judge in the parliament. Study with me in Haifa University.
But you're doing the same thing. Incidentally, I appreciate everything you're saying, and I believe it's important that Americans in general, American Jews in particular, understand if you are an Arab or a Palestinian, you want to be in Israel. It's the best place you could possibly be. Yeah. And for whatever isn't still done for the Arab Israeli, what is done is extraordinary. At the same time, I believe that if there were an Arab Israeli at this table, he or she would be able to articulate things that they don't feel yet are where they want to be if they are to feel no different than an Israeli Jew. And and it may be that no one's asked you this question. For all I know, you've never given this thought. And maybe therefore it's, you don't have an answer. But there are certainly American Jews and Israeli Jews who talk passionately from the context of a commitment, 100% commitment to Israel, that there still has to be progress made in the area of what Americans call civil rights, political rights, economic benefits for the Arab. And it seems to me that it is clear if you're in Israel, it's better to be a Jew than an Arab.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. I have Arab friends. They have the same lives as I do. I really don't see how their lives in Israel are different than mine. They go to work, they have their lives, their normal lives. You can bring here any Israeli Jew and he'll find reasons to complain about the government, about Bibi. It's not that hard to complain, but at the end of the day, it's what you're making out of your lives. It's what you're making out of your life. And when we have 20% of our parliament, Arab Israelis sitting in the parliament, we had a Supreme Court judge who convicted an Arab Supreme Court judge who convicted the president. Then, you know, I don't see that any other place in the world.
And the head of the elections committee as well.
Yes.
Yeah, Bo, that is so impressive. Most Jews don't know it. Most Americans don't know it. An Arab Israeli justice of the Supreme Court of Israel was in charge of these recent elections.
Right.
And as you say, he also was in charge of the conviction of
the former president.
The former president of Israel. Yes, there are ways in which Israel is, again, since nothing is ever perfect, humanly it's a model of what we would want society to be. At the same time, I am not sure that I would say what you say. And that
I'm saying that we're constantly trying to improve ourselves. Israel is the most critical country for itself. You can just open the news and see how much we are constantly criticizing ourselves, and it's good because we want to improve, because we want to be a better version of ourselves. But at the end of the day, when I look on the bigger picture, if you're talking about Gaza, we are hurting when innocent civilians are dying. But I know when I'm covering the news from down south and I'm sitting on a hilltop at 8 in the morning, seeing the rocket being launched, knowing that now my parents in Ashdod are waking up from the sirens, and after 10 minutes I'm seeing the Air Force airplane coming and throwing leaflets on a building to say that they need to evacuate the building. This is a country that I'm proud to take part of, and I don't know any other country in the world that would act the same. And at the end of the day, it comes down to this, to acting by your moral values, to your Jewish values, to be proud of what you were doing in the army. You can see how Elad and I are perfectly two normal people who served in the army for 3 years, and it's not a normal thing for a young person to do. And at the end of the day, that's what's important. And with saying all of the things that we've been through in our history, I'm still saying that I want peace. I'm still saying that I want to achieve a better future for my kids. And you won't hear that often, unfortunately, on the Palestinian side. Sometimes because it's not allowed, sometimes it's because it's not okay. But Israel is constantly craving for peace, and that's what's important. You'll see tons of peace organizations and peace rallies, and the feeling of growing up in Israel with our parents saying to us, and when you'll be 18, you won't need to go to the army because there probably won't be an army. That's what's important, that although I was experiencing different of terror attacks, war with Iraq, war with Syria, war with Lebanon. This was my childhood. I'm still saying that I want peace. I'm still meeting Palestinians. I'm still participating in all kinds of peace programs. I have Arab friends. I have Palestinian friends, and I'm still constantly trying to find a way to solve this. I'm not saying, you know, this is my country and leave me alone. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I want to solve the conflict. I want to live in peace.
It's such a complicated situation. But as Lital said, this craving for peace and praying for peace and doing everything that we're doing towards that is the correct way to go. Participating in programs, to see the other side, to drop down the barriers and not be afraid of the other side is much better than just walking out and not having a dialogue. Just an example of that. Last year we visited one of the universities, and we started talking, and then like the timer ticked, and the crowd just got up, took down their sweatshirts, put the flags and keffiyehs and the Arab symbols.
It was anti-Israeli protesters.
And they walked out. It's something called a walkout. It's a protest. And you can hear us on the video that we shot saying to the people, sit down, let's have a conversation, let's have a dialogue. We flew halfway around the world to talk to you because we believe that's bringing peace. And what you're doing is not making peace come any faster. And of course, we were left alone in that room.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. If there were a Palestinian leadership that said to the state of Israel, we will recognize Israel as a Jewish state and we will live in peace with you forever, would you be willing to create a Palestinian state on the West Bank?
I think that if you ask a high majority of Israelis, way up there in the 80–90%, they will tell you that if someone on the other side will be strong enough, and on our side, strong leadership from both sides, willing to sign a peace agreement after these terms are met, then the day after that we will have a peace, a long-lasting, tens of years of peace.
But you didn't say yes.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay. If that wasn't clear.
And what would is your answer yes also?
My answer is also yes, yes. And by the way, we've came across some Palestinian students in the store that tells us that they want a one state. They don't want a two state. They want a one state, no nationality. It won't be called a Jewish state. That's their solution.
No Israel.
Yeah,
that's what
no
they
Israel.
Want.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it's not like all the Palestinians want a Palestinian
Okay.
state.
And that was going to be my next question.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of your personal experience and your sense living in the state of Israel, do you think there is on the other side some similar to you, a driving desire of people your age, let alone a leadership, that really wants to say, yes, we'll live in peace with the state of Israel, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Does it exist or not?
I think that 100% it exists. You have people at the end of the day want to live their lives, want to raise their kids. They don't want to deal with security issues day in, day out. And at the end of the day, I think that the basic wanting or craving of a person is to live in his life in peace. Unfortunately, we have leaders, we have educational systems, we have all those problems. You know, when I see the Palestinian. When I see Abu Mazen giving initiatives to terrorists, when I see him giving social securities to the families of terrorists, naming streets after suicide bombers, or asking, his first condition when Israel was asking to sit down to the table and negotiate, his first condition was for Israel to release hundreds of terrorists. And that's not the way to do it. That's not the way. If someone is really craving for peace, it's not supposed to give initiative to terrorists. It needs to condemn terror. And I think that's the problem with the leadership, with the educational system. You can open any history book, any geography book on the Palestinian side. You won't even find Israel marked on the map because it's not okay to say that Israel is existing. So all those stuff has to change, and I think that maybe the next generation, when all those level of hatred will start decreasing, then we'll start and see a change.
Who hates you?
Who hates me?
Who hates you? When you said the level of hatred, who are you thinking of? Where's the hatred emanating from? Out of where?
I'm thinking.
Who hates you in the Palestinian side?
You can see that on both sides. You can see Israelis who are afraid of Palestinians, and you can see Palestinians who are afraid of Israelis. You can see that on both sides.
By the way, fear is different than hatred. Do you hate Palestinians?
No, I don't hate Palestinians.
By the way, you answer the question like the question is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting question.
Do you hate Palestinians?
Of course not. I think that eventually, I mean, as I always say, we are not going anywhere. They are not going anywhere. Hatred won't get us anywhere.
Doesn't matter. Do you hate Palestinians?
Of course not. Of course not.
It's
of
course not, isn't it?
Of course not. I think
and I
more
want you to
than
know,
that.
I have talked to people your age and younger, Israeli soldier after Israeli soldier, former. I asked the same question: do you hate Palestinians? And they look at me like both of you looked at me. It was like the question makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's something that makes no sense because.
But you understand that a moment ago you said there was hatred on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
You said that.
Because I'm hearing people sometimes talking like that.
You hear Israelis who hate Palestinians.
Yes,
You
you can hear Israelis who are saying
So
that they are afraid.
are you unique? By the way, fear and hatred are two different things. Are you unique when you say to me you don't hate?
I don't think I'm unique. No, I'm not unique.
Are more people you think like you or not like you?
Like me.
We are the
yes.
majority. We are the majority of young people understanding that things need to change. Hatred will not get us anywhere, and doing what we're doing is the better way to
It's
go.
not about whether it'll get
The
you anywhere.
minority, you always,
It is how
I mean,
you feel. Either you
extremists you'll have on both sides. We as the majority will say clearly, we do not hate Palestinians. I personally don't know people who hate Palestinians.
I don't either.
So,
Including, by the way, people who are a lot older than you are. It's not what I experience in the Israeli society.
Mm-hmm.
I almost experience, and tell me if I'm being too romantic. It's almost like, I'm so sorry that we have to go to war with them. I'm sorry they can't accept us.
Mm-hmm.
This is such a tragedy. It's a human tragedy, but it's not one of our imposing. It's imposed upon us. And of course, there are some Israelis who hate. There are some Israelis who are just warped. But the vast majority of Israelis react exactly as you did. What are you asking me?
Mm-hmm.
But I believe it's different on the other side. I believe that for all the reasons you describe, Palestinians have been taught for generations to hate the Israeli.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that is standing in the way of your dream. And when you say maybe the next generation, halavai, it should only be so, we should all, it's not about, I'll be gone. Maybe it'll happen in your lifetime. But there are people right now who are pushing Israel to make certain concessions for peace. And it seems to me that a more and more realistic view is you can't force something when there's no partner on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about how much you want peace, it resonates inside me. At the same time, I'm saying to myself, it's a tragedy that both of you, as lovely and as idealistic as you are, you also are. I have a sense you really have a feeling for realism as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the realism is you can't make, peace can't, and incidentally, it's not even peace, just an end to the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to put our hands around each other. We have to stop killing each other, and we have to say to each other, we will live side by side. You live, we live, and there may be ways that we can cooperate with each other. As you look at the reality now, what gives you the most pause? What do you say? It's not about your trip to America. When you get back home and people say, what was it like? And then you become, again, part of your own daily routine. And now you're talking to your friends, you're talking to your parents, you're thinking about it. What gives you the most pause, the most concern? And are there any places, despite what we know is true, are there places for real optimism? I mean real. Don't be Pollyanna with me. Are there places for real optimism?
I believe that, after all the slightly harsh things that we said here and we talked about, I truly believe that there is, if you don't have hope, and if you don't have hope for peace, then it's lost. Then what will you do? I truly believe that, as once I said once, a mother is a mother wherever she is. So our mothers, when they had us, and they said, when you will reach the age of 18, there will be no army, no wars, peace. I'm guessing that on the other side, or let's say I'm hoping, that on the other side, it's the same. I'm not sure, I'm not positive, but I need to hope that that's the other side.
I just want to give you one thought. This is a thought that frightens me. And American Jews, and maybe world Jewry, has a hard time grasping this. There was once a time when there was no state of Israel. And we had to fight for it. And there were people who fought diplomatically. They fought in the halls of government. And there were Jews who had to fight with weapons. And even before the War of Independence, there's the Irgun, the Haganah, and they believed it was necessary to fight to get ultimately their state. And some of them lost their lives.
Right.
And their mothers and fathers wept for them. But their mothers and fathers also believed that they died in a noble, sanctified, they died al Kiddush Hashem. And they didn't want their children to die. But there are some deaths which have purpose. And I want to say to you gently, you talked earlier about how it's important to understand the other side. In my understanding, it's the exact same thing right now for a portion of the Palestinian people who believe to the core that you've stolen their land.
That is correct.
And if their children die in their attempt to win their land back, for them, it is no less of a holy quest than it was for us when we were fighting for the state of Israel. Now, I happen to believe that there are certain rules that I'd like to apply, but maybe that's, again, romantic. People say there are no rules in love or war. But I sometimes think that the Jewish perspective doesn't take into account what drives the Palestinian mother and father.
That is correct.
And the reason why these are heroes to them is they don't have an air force. Their army is strapping the suicide bomb.
Right.
Now, the horror of that is, and you write so movingly about this, it's about the disco and the pizza parlor, and you're worrying when you go out with your 18-year-old friends or 16-year-old friends, not about what clothes you're going to wear, but will you be safe the entire night? And I know the Palestinian says to me, yeah, well, you know what? When the Israeli jet flies over, I have to worry about whether my kid is going to be safe. And I argue it's different. It's different because we're not aiming at civilians. They're aiming to, and their answer is, it's the only way you'll pay attention. That's their argument to themselves. So I'm only saying to you, I wish it were simpler.
Oh.
And for me,
we all.
Right. And for me, what I ultimately believe in is that the ultimate problem is not the tactic. The ultimate problem is the philosophy. And that I said to you, are you willing to share the land? And you said yes, and you said yes. And I believe that the biggest problem you face as Israelis, and the three of us face as committed Jews, committed also to the Zionist ideal, is that while we are willing to share the land, you're dealing with a Muslim fundamentalist ideology which is not willing to share the land. And that's the biggest problem we have. Now, I interrupted you. I was going to, I don't know what you want to say now, but I want...
I can complete or relate to what you're
Please.
saying on my way of solving the conflict. I think that we're dealing in a whole different conflict because this is a conflict in the Middle East. This is a conflict. We're not assigning a peace agreement with Norway or with Switzerland, and we have, the moment that we understand that we are living in the Middle East and that we need to change our perspective because we're dealing, as you said, we're dealing with Arabs. In the basic of the Quran, it's not even okay to live under a different regime. It's not even okay to live in a country that is not Muslim. That's like the basic of Islam. And I think that the moment that we'll understand that, it's not about in 2005, we withdrew from Gaza, from the Gaza Strip, and just look on what happened. We just got more and more rockets in return. So I think that the only way to solve this conflict or to achieve peace is, first and foremost, is to know our roots, to know this is our land, our country, our right to be there, and not to start negotiating by saying, what are we willing to give up? Because otherwise this thing will never, ever end. We have the refugees problem, which is just growing bigger and bigger every year. And we have other problems that are not really a problems, it's just a symptoms of the other side to keeping the conflict going till we'll just give up our land. So I think that the conflict will only be solved when we'll start strengthening our positions and stay guard and stay put on what ours and understanding that this is our homeland, this is our only Jewish state, and we're not willing to leave our homeland.
Beautifully said. Do you say that on campus?
Yes. Whenever I've been asked more political questions.
Good
yes.
for you. You say it on campus too?
Of course. we always emphasize that it's a whole different ballgame. If people think that this is something simple to solve, or as the opening of one of the books that I read, that's a quote, few Westerners understand the Middle East as they should. It's a whole different ballgame. Mm-hmm. What we have in the Middle East is uncomparable to nowhere in the world. And it's a place of ideology and religion and land and money and everything mixed together. But with all that, we're hoping for better days.
And you also say that on college campuses.
Of course.
Because I'm worried that on liberal college campuses, the audience doesn't want to hear what you've just said.
In a lot of places, or in some places, let's say in some places, people don't want to hear. They want to come, shout out their message, and leave. Mm-hmm. Come, be heard, and leave. And that's it. And that's what sometimes is very frustrating. We go on the road from 7 a.m. to whenever the tour is over. And when you find someone that just doesn't want to listen, it's very frustrating.
Kol hakavod to both of you. You're both fabulous. How lucky Stand With Us found you. And by the way, let's give Stand With Us kudos. I mean, kol hakavod to Stand With Us. I hope everybody watching finds out more about them. And I am so glad they chose the two of you. It is wonderful to meet you. I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha for the rest of the trip.
Thank you.
Did you go home in safety? You have a girlfriend?
Yes, I do.
Serious girlfriend?
A serious girlfriend.
Well, good. I hope it works out. You have a boyfriend yet?
I'm looking for a shidduch. Yeah. I'm like, where is he? Where is he? Maybe here.
You're on JBS. You may anybody.
J-Swipe.
She's looking for the Jewish husband.
Okay. I mean, both of you, whoever is with either of you, will be very, very lucky.
Thank you.
Thank you very
so
much. Thank you for having us.
It was
so much
wonderful
for having us.
You're both fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
My conversation with Lital and Elad, two former soldiers from the IDF who are now touring America with Stand With Us, and they're doing a fabulous job, not only representing the state of Israel, but giving the people who hear them an opportunity to think through some of the issues. And Elad says some people walk out. I'm sure most of them who come in here are moved by both of these young people. So I hope you enjoyed meeting them as much as I have. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to anything you've heard on this edition of L'Chaim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from many of you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
L'Chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to JEM, to Jim, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.